What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Flying Prepper Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be diving into some recent news headlines underscoring the need for prepping. We're going to explore mainly an Air Force Brigadier General sobering warning about China's military capabilities and potential cyber attacks on the U.S. power grid. Plus, we're going to be sharing some evidence of foreign actors like China and Russia embedding malware into our infrastructure. So get ready to understand why prepping is so critical today. So let's get it. All right, everybody, welcome back, like I said, to the Flying Prepper Podcast. I'm your host, JT, and this is episode 2, and we're going to be tackling some critical topics, hitting some headlines. We're going to be sounding the alarm for anyone paying attention to global security and personal preparedness. We'll dive into some recent news. We'll highlight why prepping is more relevant than ever, to include the main topic, which is a stark warning from an Air Force general about China's military capabilities and the looming threat to our power grid. So let's get going here. We're just going to hit a couple headlines that kind of relate to the topic we're going to be talking about today. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I'd like to kind of hit some current news. Just to kind of relate to the things that we'll be talking about in whatever episode topic we're going to be talking about. So the first article we're going to hit is a headline from Al Jazeera. This is as of June 1st, 2025. It's now June 10th. So this is a little bit over a week ago. And the headline is China's military buildup intensifies as Taiwan tensions escalate. And basically the summary of this article was, June 1st, Al Jazeera article reports Beijing's response to U.S. warnings highlighting China's naval exercises and rising tensions, signaling potential supply chain disruptions. And why this article really matters, to us as in the prepping community is a Taiwan conflict could spike food, fuel, tech prices. Like it could spike all that stuff, making like stockpiling and prepping and like the essentials pretty critical right now. So let me go to the headline so you guys don't think I'm making this junk up. So here is the headline from Al Jazeera. I don't know how reliable Al Jazeera is. This is just the headline I found, and this article kind of dives in. If you're interested, I'll put the link in the show notes to this article. Okay, cool. Article number 2. I mean, there's plenty of articles about this. I don't even think I need to show this, but what's happening in LA right now with all of the the ICE raids that sparked the protests that's still going on to this day. They started last Thursday, I believe, and they're still going on as of last night, probably going on today. I haven't really checked what's going on today. And, basically this article the headline was like, our community is under attack. And the summary of this is, on June 6th, the Los Angeles Times piece that this is coming from details protests after ICE raids in LA that sparked vandalism, and some violence and things like that. It was not all peaceful. There's plenty of evidence out there of that. But what President Trump did, as controversial as he is he's like, all right, he didn't think the local government in LA was kind of handling this properly. They were saying it was mainly peaceful, and there's clear evidence that there was some violence and some looting and things like that. So President Trump was like, all right, well, I'm just going to federalize 2,000 National Guard troops and deploy them to LA to help out, and not help out in crowd control. Mainly they're there to guard the federal buildings from any type of, looting, vandalism, things like that. I mean, we've seen in, Louisville a couple years ago, and some of the other riots that happened, like in Kenosha, like businesses getting burned to the ground, and people attacking buildings and things like that. So they're there to protect the federal buildings. They're not there to do any type of crowd control. And then he just announced, I think, the deployment of 700 U.S. Marines to basically do the same thing. And from some of the different reports that I've read, the reason why he did the Marines was they'll get there faster, because only about, I think out of the 2,000 National Guard troops, only a couple hundred are actually like there and ready right now. So the Marines are kind of to supplement those numbers until all of those National Guard troops are activated and brought up and are in there and doing their thing. And then I think the Marines are done. But that sparked a whole ton of like all kinds of controversy about the Insurrection Act and all this other stuff, and there's some legality questioning about that. But you know, things are heating up in LA, and we've seen stuff like this before with unrest. But it sparks like why this matters is like social unrest and potential disruptions to services like transportation, safety. You know, it highlights the need to be prepared, because if I'm in LA right now and I'm just a resident, and you know, maybe I'm not participating in the stuff, but I'm living downtown LA or Sacramento or wherever, and I don't really want to go. I fear to leave my house and go to the store and like get my food and stuff. Like to have a supply of that in your house, like you can ride out, you know, you can ride all this stuff out. I would think that something like this, couple weeks maybe, and then it'll calm down. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But if you're in areas that like that, it, you know, to be prepared and have food, water, all that stuff to kind of weather that storm. If you're afraid to go out and go to the store, I mean, it makes sense. So third headline is the FBI director, and then we're going to hit this hard today, is the FBI director issues a dire warning on Chinese hacking threats. And this was from April 18th of 2024, but it was a good read about how, you know, the FBI director at that time, I think his name is Christopher Wares. I can't pronounce his last name. Anyway, he's worrying about Chinese hackers targeting the U.S. critical infrastructure, power, water, and telecommunications, which will disrupt civilian life. Like, yeah, that would disrupt our lives if they hit us like that. But so why that matters is cyberattacks could literally kill power for weeks. So having those backup power preps, food, communication tools, radios, stuff like that. I mean, that those are important devices to have in your preps, because the likelihood of Chinese hackers or Russian hackers attacking our power grid and taking it down, I believe it's only a matter of time. But that's something that, you know, we'll have to see how things develop. But it seems lately that's becoming more and more of a common thing around the prepping community, like especially on YouTube, a lot of YouTube videos on the China threat and the cyber attacks on our infrastructure and how they're already in our infrastructure. And up until about a week and a half ago, I didn't watch really any videos other than your prepping videos or your, you know, self-made news podcasters that are like, hey, I have this source deep in the government that told me that China's really in. And it's like stuff like that, where you have people that aren't in government or aren't in the positions of knowledge saying, I heard from so-and-so that so-and-so, this is, you know, they're doing this or the X, Y, and Z. And for me, I take that with a grain of salt, because whenever I watch those YouTube videos where, you know, it's like, I was a Marine for 15 years in a Navy SEAL or the Green Beret, and you know, I have access to all this information and all this inside sources, and they were telling me this, and I've heard that for years, and I just take it with a grain of salt now. Like, I just do. I like raw data. I like to hear things from the source. I tend not to take some of the things that people say, because like I said, I think I mentioned in episode 1, like a lot of the prepping community, especially on YouTube, you know, these guys are trying to sell product because this is their life. Like, their YouTube channel is their income, and you know, they have a lot of good information and good content, but then when it comes to like, here's my bug out bag and here's the affiliate link that you can go buy this and this is why it's the best, like I don't get into all that. It's just a bag, yo. It's literally just a bag. I don't care how many pockets it has. I'm not paying $200 for your tactical bag when I can get the same bag, like bag, for $50 on Amazon. It's just a bad go. In any case, I digress. So, what I really wanted to get into in this episode is I watched this video. It was a briefing that the commander of the 413th Air Wing, basically he was the commander of Edwards Air Force Base. He was giving a talk to local community leaders about the growing threat of China. And the reason why this one really sparked my interest, and I shared this with a lot of different people, is because it was an Air Force briefing given to community leaders. It wasn't a highly produced video from some prepping channel about the growing threat of China. This was a briefing that this guy did, and he showed slides and data and all this stuff about the growing China threat, and I learned a ton from that. Before that video, I was more into prepping for space weather, solar flares, things like that. And I'm going to do a whole episode on space weather because that's what I'm really into. But since watching that video of the briefing, I'm really paying a lot more attention to what's going on between China and Taiwan, because what he gets into, quite frankly, was sobering. It was just eye-opening and really sobering about, oh my gosh, China's not a third world country anymore. We kind of knew that, but we all thought from a technological standpoint, our technology, as far as our military, our Navy, far exceeds China. Come to find out, that's not the case. They are equal to our technology, and they have the ability to build ships way faster than we can. And they're already doing it. So we're going to get into that. So I'm going to put the link to the entire video in the show notes, in the description. So I would encourage everybody who's watching this or listening to this, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, whatever, to actually go watch the entire thing. It's about 40 minutes long is the gist of the briefing. Yeah, so it's about 40 minutes long, but I want to hit I think 6 key talking points that he kind of talks about, and we'll kind of walk through and talk through as we go from there. So the first clip I want to show is just a clip from this briefing where he's talking through China's they're mirroring our Air Force bases, and they're mirroring our ships, and they're putting them out in the China desert and doing drills and practicing, and they're preparing for something. So this is the first clip I want to show you guys, and kind of we'll kind of talk through this, and we'll see, and then we'll kind of go from there with this first clip. So here we go with the first clip.
For me, please. So here's Edwards, and let's zoom out. Go ahead and go next. We're going to take a little tour. It turns out that the People's Republic of China also has an Edwards Air Force Base. It is also in a desert. Ours is in the Mojave Desert, our little corner of the Mojave Desert. If we go over to the Gobi Desert and zoom in, Dingjin Airfield is China's version of Edwards. I am proud to say we have more runways. Our airfield is the biggest airfield in the world. But the People's Republic of China, the People's Liberation Army, and the Chinese Communist Party they are modernizing and growing at a staggering pace. But they're doing more than just that. They're actually actively preparing for something. So go ahead and build for me. So they're on Dingjin Airfield. There's this interesting little structure right here. You're like, okay, that looks like a target or whatever. Go ahead and build for me. That is actually Taichung International Airport in Taiwan, in the northwest corner of Taiwan. They have a model, 1-for-1 scale model of the international on Taiwan. It's kind of clear what their intent is. Let's zoom out a little bit further. So go ahead and build for me. So if we were to go from Dingjin Airfield and then go a couple hundred miles to the west, deeper into the Gobi Desert. So this is kind of like us going over to Nevada, to the Nevada Test and Training Range, and zooming in there and taking a look at what targets do they put out there in the Gobi Desert. Oh, there's a target. That's interesting. Go ahead and build for me. Next slide. There we go. So that is a silhouette of the 1-for-1 silhouette of the Ford-class aircraft carrier. It's kind of clear what their target is. Go ahead and build for me. Next slide. We'll zoom out again. There's a frigate. These are our railroad tracks. There's another carrier. The railroad tracks curve around the desert. Those are evasive maneuvers that the ships would take as the ballistic missiles, DF-17s and other missiles, are coming in from above. So they have a range that actively targets our ability to project power into the Pacific. Go ahead and build one more time for me, because there's more. This little range there is just filled with targets. There's a destroyer. And so it's pretty clear what China's intent is. So not only are they modernizing and increasing the size of the People's Liberation Army at a staggering pace, but they're not trying to hide the fact of what they're doing. The next slide.
Okay, so you guys saw that China is actively building these targets that are one-for-one scale models of our stuff in Taiwan stuff, like the one-for-one scale model of the Taiwan airport, one-for-one scale model of our aircraft carriers and our destroyers and our frigates. And they're putting them out in testing grounds. And what do you think they're doing? You think they just build this stuff for giggles? Like, no, they're actively training and targeting those models for when the potential conflict with the U.S. happens over Taiwan, in my opinion. So that was the first clip, and it just, the discussion of how China studies and mirrors U.S. military and infrastructure targets. That's eye-opening. That's eye-opening. Here's another one I want to go through. So this segment. He talks about Xi Jinping's suggested, like, the strategic timeline for potential aggressions that are tied to Taiwan. So he talks through, like, this is when we think they're going to do it, because they've said this is when they're going to do it, or around this time frame. So I'm gonna crack this one open, and we'll listen to this for a minute.
If Admiral Hirohito had said, "Hey, on Sunday morning at 7:30, we're going to bomb Pearl Harbor," we might have listened to Admiral Hirohito, Admiral Yamamoto. It was the Emperor Hirohito. We might have listened to the Emperor of Hirohito if Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, had said, "We're going to bomb Japan," just so you know. We might have listened. What if Chairman Xi tells us what he's going to do? Would we pay attention? Next slide.
For those of you who are watching and can't see, he's got a picture of Chairman Xi saying the PLA shall be ready by 2027 to conduct armed unification of Taiwan.
So this date of 2027, actually, the closer we get to it, the less worried that I am. This date has changed significantly over time. So when Chairman Xi first came to power, first seized power, and he's now rewritten the Constitution. Normally, chairmen can only serve for a 10-year term. He has rewritten the Constitution, so he can serve as long as he wants to. And his father lived into his 90s, if I'm not mistaken. So Chairman Xi could be around for a long time. And he's also systematically eliminated all of his political opposition in the Chinese Communist Party. So he has a lockhold. And so we don't talk about China as a nation. We talk about the Chinese Communist Party. There's a single authoritarian rule that dictates everything. It's authoritarian dictatorship. And by the Chinese Communist Party, since there is no political opposition, it's pretty much whatever Chairman Xi thinks. So that's why we can talk about what one person thinks, and that's why we're often trying to communicate directly with him. Look, don't start World War III, because we got the B-21. So originally in 2013, he gave the PLA, he says, I want a modern military. And then about the 2019 timeframe, he gave it 2035. And then he moved that date up to 2032. And then he's moved it forward. So he has moved it back in time to give a more aggressive target, because he is afraid of an inability. And so that 2027 date is the latest date. And I'm going to show you the growth that China has made towards that 2027, and it is absolutely staggering. So go to the next.
Okay, so he gives, basically President, he calls him Chairman Xi, gave this date of 2027, and that's changed over the years as 2035. Then he less and less, and he gave this mandate to the PLA saying, I want to modernize my stuff back in 2013. My opinion is, I think the reason why he keeps moving the date up is how fast they're modernizing. He doesn't have to wait till 2035 because they're modernizing their stuff and building their stuff so fast. They're going to be ready a little bit earlier. Now, I don't think he's going to give a date of April 18th, 2027, we're doing this. No, he's not going to broadcast that. And it may not even be 2027. It could be sooner. Because China's about the long game. Like, they'll play the long game. They're not about the short game. They're going to play the long game. And they're not going to broadcast anything. I think there's going to be no warning. I think it's just going to happen. And with what we're seeing, the pattern happen with these dates getting moved up in years, I don't think it may not be 2027. Personally, I think it might be earlier. And we're going to see why, because he's going to go into the buildup of, kind of how China has built their military up to really rival ours. From a naval standpoint, and this is some of these points that we're going to talk that he's going to talk about is why I think it could be earlier. It's because I think China's about ready, but we'll get into that. So before we get into like the build up, like there's always this question of like how will China get there? There's a 90-mile stretch between Taiwan and China. Obviously. There's ports around Taiwan. They're heavily defended. How are you going to get troops there? Troops will be on ships, but how, China's waters around the ports are really shallow, so you can't get big ships of troops in there. China's got to answer for that. And we're going to get into that in this next clip of how China's going to get troops over to Taiwan. So let's take a listen to this.
Talk about it. But here's the challenge. It's only about 90 miles across the strait here. So there's we don't talk about, normally you have international airspace or international, you have waters, exclusive economic zones out to 200 nautical miles. You got 12 miles off the coast. There's an ADIZ that's typically, out there several hundred miles. You don't have that territory there. So we talk about the median line. And I'll show you the stats of how frequently the People's Liberation Army is violating that line. But here's the challenge is how do you get all your forces from here over to here? That's why Taichung Airport sits right there. And this is a translation. So this is a screenshot from an internal People's Liberation Army plan. And you can see all these ports here. That's part of the challenge. There's only 5 deep water ports on the island of Taiwan. Of course, they're heavily defended. Which is a good idea, right? If you want peace, prepare for war. But China's got a plan for that. Next slide. So you don't need a deep water port. So this is a new satellite imagery from just a couple weeks ago. These are relocatable piers. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are each independent ships. These little gantry things here. So you can actually sail across the 90 miles. You link them up. And you can go about a mile out into open water, so you actually don't need a deep water port. And you just bring up a roll-on, roll-off, and tanks just roll right off there onto the beach wherever you want. They're actively doing this right now in plain sight. Next slide.
Okay, so for those of you who didn't see, maybe you're just listening on Spotify and you can't see the video, he showed a slide of basically 3 ships, and they got bigger and bigger as they went out. So 3 ships that were linked by these huge gantry like bridges. And the way it looked like it worked was all the troops would be on the big ship out about a mile out, and then there's this big gantry that, boom, gets on extends out to a medium-sized ship, that doesn't need as deep of water, And then that has a gantry that boom deeps out to another ship that kind of has, it's like a boat, looked like a big amphibious boat that, you know, is a boat, and then it's got wheels on the bottom that can drive up, you know, onto into the shallow water. And then, you know, now you have this land bridge that's basically linking these three ships together, and you just drive on, and you don't need a port. You can literally go on any of the beaches around Taiwan. You can just, and who knows how many setups of this they have. Do they have just the one with the three ships and that's where all the troops, or do they have multiples of these that will land in various places that are not ports, that are not defended, that Taiwan may not be prepared for, and that's how they're going to get their troops on? We don't know, but what's one of the ways we think that, you know, when China does go after Taiwan, that's how they're going to get their troops there. So and I'll tie this all together, how this deals with us and how this will affect us at home. So the next thing is the China shipbuilding capacity. So this is him talking about the rapid buildup of China's shipbuilding capacity. And this is where this is one of the sections where my eyes were like, oh, they are outbuilding us by a lot. So let's take a listen to this.
This is their shipbuilding capacity. They have there's dozens state-owned shipyards in China. We have 4. They have 230 times the capacity. Just one shipyard in China last year alone, in 2024, built more tonnage of ships than the U.S. did since the end of World War II. In 1 year, they built more ships than we have built by tonnage, which is what matters, than we built since the end of World War II. Next slide. And they're not just, we used to count, well, it's just cheap China technology. We've got that technological advantage like we had over the Soviets. It's not. China is now a modern force. This is a stealth frigate. They just commissioned this ship in January. This is a frigate. It's designed for anti-submarine warfare. So that's one of the advantages that we still have over the People's Liberation Army Navy, is our submarine technology. Unfortunately, the Straits of Taiwan are very, very shallow. Pretty easy to find submarines. And if you want to go after submarines, this is how you do it. These are stealth frigates specifically designed for area denial anti-submarine warfare. Very, very modern. Next slide. And they have the capacity to build lots of these. And so this was the order of battle in the Pacific. We're April now, so this was 2 years ago.
Okay. We won't get into the order of battle that he's about to talk about, because he basically essentially is just showing the difference between like what we built 2 years ago to what they built, and then to now. Kind of goes into that and just reinforces that China's shipbuilding capacity is way more than ours. Now, one thing of note is that he did mention later on in this, in this segment where he's talking, that I think they only have 12 shipbuilding ports or whatever that are doing the military vessels. The rest are the commercial, the big ones that bring over all of the freight all over the world, But in a wartime scenario, they could easily, just like we did in World War II, all of our manufacturing kind of flipped and retooled to building military vehicles, tanks, jeeps, trucks, planes, boats. They can do the same thing. They can easily flip the rest of those ports, 88 ports, from a commercial application to a military application. And then when you have 100, shipbuilding ports, solely focusing on building naval ships, they would overwhelm any navy that's out there. And like he said, it's not cheap Chinese stuff. Like, they're building stealth frigates, which is, the stealth frigate is mainly they're submarine hunters. And he mentioned that submarines, the Taiwan Straits, like, that's shallow water. around, all around that, so it's pretty easy to find submarines in shallow water, and the stealth frigate is solely designed to counter American subs, which we still have a leg up on them. Our sub technology is way better, is the best in the world, but they're specifically building ships to counter that for the reunification of Taiwan. So that's like crazy. When I heard about the shipbuilding capacity they have compared to ours, I mean, they built more ships in 1 year through one port in tonnage than we did since World War II? I don't know. Just they build so fast over there. So a lot of people think, well, why? I think there's two reasons why China wants to take Taiwan. A, because they've always said that Taiwan was part of China and they want to reunify that, Taiwan and China. But another reason is, TRMC is there, which is the biggest manufacturer of advanced microchips. And if China has that, they could rewrite the rules, and they basically win the game, essentially. In this next clip, short clip, he kind of goes into, he kind of addresses that. If China does get that, their edge in microchip production, like that's vital for military and cyber capabilities. And we don't have that capability to make these chips here in the United States yet. We're building plants to counter that, and we have some capacity to build those, but not like Taiwan does. And we've recognized that threat, and we are building here, but it's going to be a year, 2, 3 before those plants are even online producing chips, because they're massive structures. So let's watch this next clip, and then we'll chat through it a little bit.
And so this is where I'm going to bring it back to the Aerospace Valley. It's real easy to say, okay, well, all right, so that's Taiwan. Even if they're not ethnic Chinese, or there's a different heritage and they're not quite Chinese, they're still Eastern Asian, and so maybe we should just kind of let that go and not start World War III over the island of Taiwan. 95% of the advanced microchips are built in Taiwanese fabs by TSMC. TRMC is something different that we do up at Edwards. TSMC. 95% of the advanced microchips. Now we're in the process of building some fabs here. We don't have them. So one of the things that we have tried to do as artificial intelligence, again, we're one of those inflection points, a decisive decade for another reason, is we are denying the export controls on advanced microchips to China. Do you think Chairman Xi would have any qualms whatsoever if they took over Taiwan of denying access to those microchips now that they are writing the rules to the US? So it does matter for lots of reasons. China has built at a staggering speed. The rate at which they've built all those ships and built that Navy and built that Air Force, built that rocket force, built the hypersonics missiles, has been staggering. But they do more than that. They are also targeting our critical infrastructure, right?
Okay, so before we go into the critical infrastructure phase, I hope that clip gives you kind of an idea of the importance of Taiwan and the chip manufacturing. And I don't want to assume that everybody knows that, because some of the people I talk to have no clue what's going on in the world. They don't even have a clue that China and Taiwan have been they don't know. And my goal for this podcast is to kind of speak to those people who maybe have their eyes are starting to open and kind of educate a little bit of some of these risks and threats that are around the world, not in a fear way, but just, hey, open your eyes. There's things happening and the water is starting to simmer and it may boil over soon. I think it's just a matter of time before it does. And this is why, preparedness is a really, in my opinion, a really critical thing that people need to look into and start doing. The last clip that we're going to get into, and we're going to talk about this pretty in depth after, because it has to deal with the power grid. And you heard at the he was about to go into it, is, China targeting our critical infrastructure, our power grid, and our telecommunications and things like that. So we're going to watch this clip, but, the U.S. power grid is critical to like military deployment, civilian life, and the economy. And we're going to go into a little bit of this, but just to note that like part of this briefing was, a lot of military bases, they don't have their own independent power grids. They get their power from commercial power providers. They don't have their own power plant. They have backup generators and things like that and backup power, but their main power is from the grid. There's no like military grid for every Air Force base or every Marine base or every Army base. No, they get their power from commercial grids. So if that goes down, their operational ability will be hindered. They'll still have, their backup power, but eventually that could run dry. So let's just watch this clip. It's just staggering. This is a little bit longer clip, so bear with me, but it's really interesting stuff what he talks about. So check this out.
China has built at a staggering speed. The rate at which they've built all those ships and built that Navy and built that Air Force, built that rocket force, built the hypersonics missiles, has been staggering. But they do more than that. They are also targeting our critical infrastructure right here. We know that the Chinese have infiltrated our electrical grids. There is Chinese malware on all the SCADA systems that control electric power communications. The first indication that we have that the invasion of Taiwan has started is probably that the lights go out and that the cellular network doesn't work anymore. If it did work and you could still log into your bank account, you might not actually see anything because all the records might be scrambled. It might be confusing. There's a way to actually attack us without attacking us. Next slide. And so just as an indication, it wouldn't be that easy. So if you remember that blackout in 2003 that affected the entire Northeast, and so we're talking about the Eastern Interconnect, there's 3 different regions. When you put current down wires, they tend to sag. So during the summertime when the wind's not blowing, the electrical wires can sag. And if it turns out that there's trees there and they sag into a tree, you can actually short out a line. So that actually happened in Ohio. This little line going up to Cleveland sagged into the line. So that one came off, was kicked offline because it shorted out. Not a big deal, pretty resilient, right? But then the next one sagged because it was carrying more current. It kicked offline, so now more current is flowing this way. That one sagged, that one sagged. Now all of this power is flowing just from there. That actually sets off a chain reaction of reactive power being out of sync with the rest of the grid and leads to a rapid domino effect of the entire grid going down. It's fairly balanced, finely balanced all the time. And if you disrupt it, the entire system can collapse. And that's exactly what happened. Ultimately, 55 million people lost power. 100 people died during this from the power loss. And it was only for a couple hours. Think about if the electrical grid goes down for 6 months, because that could happen. Now, the system's not as fragile as it was in 2003, but that was a tree. That was just a natural, warm summer day. Everybody turned their air conditioners on. The line's going. Now, we don't have a lot of trees around here, but there is Chinese malware in the SCADA systems on our grid. They are in all of our critical infrastructure. Next slide. So China has more cyber operators than the rest of the world combined. There was an article in The Economist last week, Tracking the Hacking, is what it's titled, that overviews all of the operations that China's done everywhere that they are, and by a person for person. In fact, earlier, it was actually at the start of March, we're now in April, but we just indicted 12 named People's Liberation Army cyber operators. We indicted them in federal court. Now, of course, they're living in China, so unless they ever come here, we're probably never actually going to. But we've identified them. Go ahead and build for me. So this is a list since 2024 of all the cyber attacks, named cyber attacks, known cyber attacks from China, originating from China. The designation that we use, typhoons are attacks that originate from China. Dust storms are ones that come from Iran. Blizzards are cyber operations that start from Russia. These are the named operations. Go ahead and build for me, and I'll mention just a couple of them. So Volt Typhoon, we've known about since 2019, 2020 timeframe. This is Chinese malware in all of our critical infrastructure: water, electrical, communications, oil, air traffic control. They're in the SCADA systems. We know that they're there. We can't actually get them out. So that's Volt Typhoon. We've known about that one for several years now. What just emerged late last fall, Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon, we know it's been going on since 2021. This is 9 different US telecoms companies have been acknowledged that the Chinese have gotten access to their servers and have complete phone records of all of the phone calls from those telecommunications, to include my government phone, to include when he was candidate for president, candidate Trump, Mr. Trump. They have all of his records for the last 4 years. Vice President Kamala Harris records they had. The vice presidential candidate at the time, Mr. Vance, they had his phone records. So they know every single person that every government phone, as well as everybody else's, has had. That is deeply concerning, particularly as you look, just how often we are using messaging apps and other types of things. There's concern about if they're CIA operatives, and who have they called in China, and so maybe that we've just uncovered human. So that is Salt Typhoon, and we still can't kick them out. We know that there's 9 telecommunications companies that are affected. We know that they're still in the system. Once you have admin privileges, it's very, very easy to hide. This is what is known as advanced persistent incursions. And it's something that all those cyber operators in China are very, very adept at doing. The newest one was just named last month, Silk Typhoon. This is China's cyber operations targeting our cloud services. Anybody use Microsoft Teams for anything? Amazon Web Services? All these cloud services that we're becoming reliant on, this is the targeted operations against cloud services. China is doing it. Next slide. And there's a lot of them doing it. Next slide. So I do want to be very...
Okay, so that clip was a little longer, but I think it was worth the entire watch. And that one really woke me up. That one woke me up a lot, because when his statement he said was, we'll probably know when the invasion of Taiwan has started because the lights will go out. And he's not talking about the lights in Taiwan going out, although they probably will. He's talking about the lights here. All of these malwares that are in our systems, telecommunications, power grid, utilities, they're just sitting dormant. And you heard him. We can't get rid of them. They're just there waiting for activation. And I think a good play from China will be when they do, right before they start the invasion of Taiwan, they will activate that malware in those systems and start bringing down our infrastructure, which is going to hinder the U.S.'s response to respond to Taiwan and give Taiwan aid, because there's going to be so much panic and stuff happening here. Because you just imagine something. Okay. We've all experienced power outages, whether it's a couple hours, a couple days, maybe a week, but we still had communication, which I think is the key point. We were still able to get on the internet with our cell phones and things like that to see what's going on. Now, imagine if all those systems went down and you're an average family who doesn't prepare. You have no way to communicate with anybody because your cell phones don't work. Your lights aren't on. None of your utilities work. How long do you think before panic starts happening. And how long do you think before some of the bad actors here in the United States start taking advantage of the panic and the chaos that ensues because of that? You know, everybody will be overwhelmed. All the public services will be overwhelmed. So, you know, looting, all that stuff happens. And I think that's within the first couple days. A power outage with communication, you know, people could still get what's going on. They can check the outage maps on their local utility providers of, you know, an estimated time that'll get back up. We have no idea how long it would take to get our grid back up if there was a cyber attack. Could be weeks, could be months. Who knows when it can come back up? But that opened my eyes a lot, like a lot, because I mean, there's basically 16 critical infrastructure sectors. I don't know all of them that rely on electricity. So a cyber attack could disable power. That halts logistics. So trucking, that halts that. Because if you don't have electricity, you can't pump gas or diesel into trucks to move product and move groceries to your store. So how long does your average grocery store, like how many days of food does your average grocery store carry? 3 days worth of food in the grocery store. How fast do you think that's gonna go away? Pretty fast, I think. Like I said, it would weaken the U.S. responses to the invasion of Taiwan. And like I said, China really plays the long game here. So when they do this, it's going to be a surprise. It's just going to happen. It's going to be coordinated. It's going to be well thought out and planned out. And, you know, if everything goes the way, you know, we think it'll go, then it'll be an interesting time. And that's why, like, his warning about the growing threat of China and how they're just modernizing everything and the speed of which they can build ships and the speed of, you know, the level of technology that they're at now rivals our own. They're an equal power to our military from a naval standpoint, and their air force is growing. They have way more troops than ours. Ours are better trained. Like, you know, if you believe in, some people think it's a numbers game. The more people, you know, the more people and ships and planes and tanks and all that, the more that you win. And technology doesn't really matter. Technology does matter, but they're becoming a real potential threat to, you know, that rivals the United States. Would China ever invade America? No, I don't think so. I mean, the whole Red Dawn thing that you know, the movies The Red Dawn. I don't see that ever happening. We're geographically, like, we would be really hard to invade, and I don't even see that happening. I think China wants to become a world dominating power. I don't think they necessarily want to control the world as far as like their occupation. They don't want to occupy the world. They just want to control it. They want to be a world power and dictate terms of everything. Like, that's what they want. That's what their government wants. Now, the people of China, let's kind of like pull back a little bit. I don't think our beef should necessarily be with people. When we say China, we're not referring to every human being that lives in China. Like, I don't think we have a problem with the people of China. We have a problem with the government of China. And I think there's a lot of people in China that have a problem with the government in China, but it's so dictatorial there. You know, they have their people locked down. So when I say all these things about China and their threat, I think it's more the government side. You know, the people, the military, the government. That's the threat, not the actual citizens that live in China. So I just want to clear that up. So his warning is a big wake-up call. You know, if China targets our power grid before a move on Taiwan, you know, we're talking blackouts, no refrigeration, no heating, no way to charge our devices, no way to get fuel. And as, you know, as preppers, those are some of the things we should think about. Okay, what if I don't have power? Well, do you have backup power? You know, generators, solar panels, you know, a plan to survive without electricity for weeks, maybe months, Nobody knows. The stakes could be higher than that. The issue is we just don't know how long the grid will be down. We've never faced this type of scenario before where bad actors have shut down our grid. But we know it's possible because Russia did it to Ukraine, cyber attack, shut down grid, And it's not like our power grid and our infrastructure is technologically superior to that of like Ukraine and other parts of the world. It's not. It's old. We all heard him. Like, it's not this advanced power grid. Like, a couple trees and sagging lines took out the entire eastern grid, and I think there's three or four main grids. There's the eastern, there's the central, the western, and then Texas. Texas has their own power grid. I think those are the four. Don't quote me on that. But the entire eastern, which I think is the largest one, it like a couple trees and sagging lines took out that grid for, I don't know how long you said, 24 hours, 8 hours. It was some time, but that should worry you that with our technologically superior technology we have in America and just the brilliant minds we have and all that, we wouldn't have thought of this and like upgraded our grid. Well, turns out we did. Back in, I'm bad with dates, 2014. I don't have the data in front of me. There was a EMP commission is what it was. It was a government EMP commission did a study on EMP attacks and cyber attacks on our power grid and basically have been sounding the alarm on our aging infrastructure. But our government and we as Americans are very reactive people. We react to disaster. We don't proactively do stuff to prevent it. And that's a problem. Because to modernize our grid to make it harder for some of these things to not happen, or to make it harder for China to get in cyber-wise, or hardening our grid to where if an EMP went off above our heads that there was some resilience to that, they found that wouldn't cost that much in comparison. A couple billion, I think it was. And and it's a lot of money, but in retrospect to what we spend our money on these days, like, we can shell out $5-10 billion to upgrade our grid. But the problem is that it's our power grid, the infrastructure, the federal government doesn't control it. They don't own it. It's all controlled by hundreds of privatized companies. There's the suppliers, the power suppliers, the guys that own the plant. There's the transmission companies. There's people that own the actual infrastructure, the power lines and all that stuff. And then there's the federal government and they don't own anything. So the issue is who's going to pay for it. So the government's like, well, it's not our infrastructure. You companies privatize. This is your problem. You pay for it. And the private companies are like, well, no, you want this done. You pay for it. We have shareholders to report to. Where you think we're going to take our profits and dump it into something that our main goal is to maximize profits for our shareholders. So there's this battle back and forth. That's why nothing's gotten done about it. It's from what I read and what I hear from multiple different sources, like online and news and reading that EMP commission. I haven't read the whole thing because reading government documents just could put you to sleep really fast. But it wouldn't be that hard is basically what I'm saying. So that's why nothing's gotten done about it. And this was done years ago. This is not some new report. This was done years ago. 5-10 years ago, this report was done. So we've known about this issue. We know that the Chinese are here. We know that they have, but I don't see anything being done about it, which is a problem. But like I said, we're very reactive. We think, well, if China does anything, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna show that. I don't think it goes down that way. But I think this is part of the reason why, when we talked about in episode 1 a little bit, like ready.gov, that site is now up and running. I don't know how new that is, but they've got a lot of content on there about, they recommend every American family have at least a week's worth of food and water and a list of basic things, flashlights, batteries, generators, things like that. This is what they recommend everybody has, because if the lights go out, the government is not going to get to you right away. They're going to prioritize. They're going to kind of triage this, right? They may focus on the big cities first and then extend out to the suburbs and then the rural. I mean, if you live in a suburb or a rural area, I wouldn't expect the government to come to your aid for a while. So things to think about as we talk, and this is only one. We've only really covered one topic, which is cyber attacks from China, and how real the threat is. And this is not meant to fear or to scare anybody. It's an existing threat. It's a possibility. This is one of many things on many different areas. We are literally just talking cyber attack, power grid, infrastructure. Forget nuclear war, forget solar flares, forget civil unrest, forget all of that. We're just talking about one threat. And even if it was just one threat and everything else was hunky-dory in the world, it would still be a reason to like start preparing for this. What would life be like if you had no power? It would not be easy. And I'm saying that as a seasoned prepper. Like, I look at the things that I have ready to go, and I start really doing a thought experiment on what happens if I am out of power. And there are things I'm missing. Like, oh my gosh, like we're on a well, like we're in a kind of a suburb area. We're not in a rural area. We have 2 3/4, almost 3 acres in a suburb area. We're on a well, but like I don't have backup power for my well because it's not, wells typically operate on 220 volts. I don't have a generator that can operate 220 volts to operate my well. I do have rain collection, but what if it doesn't rain for a month, which has happened here before? Like, I'm not, water is the most critical item. You can go a couple weeks without eating food. You can't go 3 days without water. So how am I going to get water here? Like, there are gaps even in my preparedness journey. There are gaps, and I constantly have to think through these different scenarios. And yes, it could be exhausting, but it's needed. It's necessary. You have to think through these things because it's only a matter of time before something happens that's going to affect you. It's just a matter of time. I mean, history is the best teacher. It's happened before. It'll happen again. There are patterns that literally will tell us, like, this has happened over and over and over again in societies. We haven't even hit the economic front. Like, oh man, I should do a podcast episode on the Ray Dalio's Changing World Order book. Oh, it's so good about the economic stuff. But in any case, I digress to that. So, risk of cyber attack on the U.S. power grid, and the evidence of foreign malware in our systems that we can't get rid of leaves the U.S. power grid vulnerable. It's our power grid is a complex network. There's 3,300 utilities. I think the stat is the U.S. power grid is a complex network of 3,300 utilities and 5.5 million miles of distribution lines with high voltage transformers and substations as key weak points, hard to protect or replace. Yeah, so those big transformers, those things aren't made here. We don't make them here. Guess where they're made? Some of them are made in China. I think Germany makes them, and one other country makes them, but they are massive, huge. Like, you need to, in order to transport these things, you order them, it's 18 months to get a new one. And, we would need to order quite a few. Out of the 3,300, I think they said there was 30. The 3,300, I think, are the massive transformers that make up the power grid. I think it only takes 9. You take down 9 of those transformers, the entire grid goes down. 9. So let's just assume we ordered 9 of them. Well, it's going to be at least a year and a half before they get here. With no power, no utilities for a year and a half, do you think there's going to be any utility workers or anybody that's going to transport those things? We're not going to have any, like, it'll be bad. So keep that in mind. So that, a successful attack could cause, obviously we could cause blackouts, disruption of water treatment, cripple transportation, cripple communications, the chaos lasting weeks or months. There was a 2017 report noting the grid disruptions could seriously harm the U.S. State actors that have the capability of doing this, China, Iran, and North Korea, they have advanced capabilities to do these cyber attacks. what countries are now talking to each other and doing trade with each other and working out these deals to circumvent U.S. sanctions? Oh, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, all the countries that have the capability to hit us back on the cyber front. They're all now working together. Yeah. So we did, he kind of hit on the video some of the evidence. This isn't like hearsay. This is a real briefing. This wasn't done by, a prepping channel. This is just an Air Force briefing to community leaders about the growing threat of China. And, we talked about some of the Chinese involvement and kind of how they named some of the operations, Volt Typhoon. And that's the one where it infiltrated the U.S. critical infrastructure, power grids, stuff like that. And there's some links. One of the stories that I linked about the FBI director issuing dire warnings on Chinese hacking threats. That'll be in the show notes. That's the news story hit in the beginning. Russia, there's some involvement in there. We haven't even hit on Russia stuff. But Russia has the capability of doing all this stuff. And, the evidence is really like, my take on all of this is the evidence is almost chilling. China and Russia aren't just planning. They've already got malware in our grid, just waiting to strike. So preparing for that potential eventuality, some of the things you may want to think about is like candles, batteries, flashlights, solar chargers, food, water. If we can't really rely on the grid staying up when tensions boil over. Like it's things to think about. So that's pretty much what I want to talk about this episode. This is, I didn't mean for this to be like super dark, like a super dark episode or anything like that. It's a threat that exists out there. It's just one of them that exists. And, in the next episode, we'll potentially talk about things that we can do. We'll get into like, hey, I'm just starting out. What should I go get? Here are the checklist items. We might walk through the FEMA website, like start here. Or there's some other websites out there and other channels that I really respect about this whole, if you're just getting started in this mindset, we can, you can talk about all that stuff and then give me you guys feedback. So that's gonna be it for episode 2, the Flying Prepper podcast. We've covered some urgent news, China's military buildup, protests in LA, cyber threats to our power grid. I would like for you to join me next time, episode 3. Drop your thoughts and comments or questions wherever you listen. Let's keep the prepping conversation going, but for now, I wish you guys all the best. Keep on charging, and we'll see you on the next one.